They took their sweet time releasing this, so I took my sweet time getting to reviewing it. Okay, no, I am just lazy. So, the Celestial Toymaker is relevant again. I can't imagine why. But it's only natural that, in the wake of this heightened awareness surrounding the titular character, it's about time that the mostly missing story that he originated from got resurrected as an animation. But the monkey's poor caveat here is that this project is helmed by Shapeshifter Studios. That name may be familiar to you, as in 2021 they were tasked with recreating the single missing episode of the Web of Fear serial, and...
The toilets are this way, Victoria!
It wasn't great, but it was their first attempt, and a lot can change in 3 years. I'm up for giving people a second chance. And surely there's a way to make their inherent visual style work. So, let's problem solve. What were the issues with the Web of Fear animation, and what can we learn from them? How long have you got? Well, if I could put it briefly, while the environments and set design were all nice and decently constructed, anything to do with the actual animation itself was horrifyingly uncanny across the board, with characters' movements making the whole enterprise feel like Satan's puppet show, and the character models ending up looking more like toys than they did the actual people they were meant to represent. It wasn't pleasant, to put it lightly. With that said though, is there a way that these weaknesses could potentially be turned into strengths? Is there a serial which could benefit from an animation with these qualities? So that's how we ended up here. Shapeshifter get a second chance with a different missing adventure. Though I confess this project would already have an uphill battle to impress me anyways, as the original Celestial Toymaker story is one that I've never been particularly keen on. And I say that as a 60s Who fan. Don't get me wrong, the premise is splendid. I like the idea of this godlike character with a competitive childish mentality, and his trilogic game with the Doctor is a great narrative hook. Any scenes with these two are spellbinding and are easily the highlight. The problem is, because this serial coincided with William Hartnell taking a couple of episodes off, this intense rivalry is forced to take a backseat to the busy work that the Toymaker's minions are putting the companions through. And to be blunt, it sucks. It ends up as Stephen and Dodo going through a meandering series of quests more akin to total wipeout than complementing the premise of being helpless at the mercy of this omnipotent, sadistically playful deity. And despite the threat of potentially being trapped as his toys forever, there's practically zero tension. But a good animation can turn me around on a middling narrative. Just take a look at Galaxy 4. I'm not particularly keen on Big Finish creative style, but they ended up giving us a product where the animation and the narrative actually helped to elevate each other in their own weird way, so there's hope. Can Shapeshifter succeed here? Let's start with some positives. Credit where it's due, Shapeshifter have drastically improved their character models. Not in terms of likeness, mind you, I don't know who this is, but it certainly ain't Steven. But in terms of how the models are actually constructed, it is significantly better this time around. These models are much more detailed and they are all complemented with some aesthetically pleasing shading and definition. Body proportions in general are also a lot more accurate, if certainly still stylized. Speaking of style, Shapeshifter have actually taken this opportunity to expand the world of the Toymaker to be more whimsical and unrestrained than the original television production would have allowed. The setting takes on a more abstract aesthetic all around to really sell the feeling of being in this insane demigod's domain. This extends to the supporting characters as well. All of the Toymaker's minions have undergone drastic redesigns, from the playing card characters being depicted as more geometric and jittery jittery in movement, to the clowns becoming sleep paralysis demons, to Mrs. Wiggs as a tea cozy. And of course, even the staging and layout for certain scenes has been toyed with to capitalise more on the premise. The Toymaker himself will often appear or behave in more ludicrous or whimsical ways than would have been feasible on a shoestring 60s budget, and that's not to even mention the acid trip sequence. Shapeshifter have clearly put a lot of thought into these elements and how best to convey these narrative events through the medium of animation, and I can commend them on that. I just wanted to point out that they have made some improvements, but with all that being said, some issues they've had since day one are still present here and are nigh impossible to ignore. I've already mentioned the dodgy likenesses, but I could easily forgive that as a stylistic choice if it wasn't for the actual character animation. Just like their previous attempt, this animation has been achieved through motion capture, and while the result isn't quite as bad as last time, it's still incredibly awkward. I could see someone arguing in favour of it and claiming that the uncanniness actually works with the fantasy fever dream premise of the tale, but for me it's the opposite. I think the stiffness of the mocap completely clashes with the fluid trippiness that the overall direction is going for, leading to a lot of these ambitious sequences coming off kinda cheap. It feels more like you're watching your Sims characters cycle through idle animations more than anything else, to be honest. The lip syncing is also probably the worst it's ever been in any missing episode project, and the facial animation isn't particularly impressive either. Also, this may feel like an odd point to focus on, but a lot of the time the direction comes off as very disconnected from the animation itself. More often than not with this project, it feels more like I'm just stuck in a corner watching all of this go down with no real sense of flow to the shots, as the framing isn't really making much of an effort to involve itself with the action, which makes for a stark contrast with the surviving episode that manages to be much more engrossed in its own content despite mostly being filmed in one go nearly 60 years prior. This might seem like an unfair comparison, but other missing episode animations have had a much more engaging direction than this. Full disclosure, I watched this animation in black and white with the surviving episode, as that's just what I prefer to do, and the jump back into the surviving footage, oh, that was rough. I imagine this one is going to be particularly jarring in marathons. So, where do we go from here? Do Shapeshifter have a place in future Doctor Who animations? They've certainly demonstrated an improvement over the Web of Fear in some areas, and I think they've got some solid technical skills in their arsenal. As I said, I think they're pretty good with environmental model work and even some visual effects. But this 3D motion capture animation style, in my humble opinion, it's just not clicking, and I'd rather not see it again if it's still on the cards. With that said, I think Shapeshifter could work really well in collaboration with one of the other teams. Let them focus on modelling set design with a cel-shaded approach, while BBC Studios or whoever focuses on the 2D character animation. I think that could be a compatible match. But with this animation of the Celestial Toymaker specifically, it's not my thing. I'm not really a fan. But I'm still looking forward to whatever the next animation is, so I'll see you then. Hopefully I've said everything I need to say.
About the Celestial Toymaker?
Yeah.
You said more than anybody needs to say.